All right, we are continuing with assignment 7. We're going to be turning it in today. It's November 18th. So in lieu of a presentation critique for assignment 7, you have until 11:59 tonight to get something turned in. There's only 2 requirements for it. You want to turn in your primary photo reference, so just one photo reference is necessary, and then you want to turn in your quote-unquote finished digital painting. And that's just because it needs to demonstrate the full process in at least some part of the painting, even if you don't have time to put it across to all the parts of the painting. So if we go to our assignment sheets, or to our assignments page, and we scroll down to digital painting, we can go to where we post it. Hello. And we're familiar with all of this, but this is what a final submission would look like. You know, your photo reference and then your quote-unquote finished painting. So a lot of us have already acknowledged deadline by putting up our process. Some of us have already submitted a painting. That's wonderful. Have I submitted anything? I submitted a PNG because I ran out of space. So I opened up some more space for myself. But I will remind you. So if it tells you at this time in the semester that you've run out of space in Canvas, you can always use the attachment function. So the attachment function will allow you, even if you're out of Canvas space, to still post your work. So I'm grateful for that. But of course, it's nice if we can all see it. So I'm going to go ahead, and I think I've cleared up enough space for me to do this. Submit my primary photo reference, which is going to be this thing, which is just this photo. I'm doing a Muppet self-portrait, right? But there's obviously a lot of other images that have helped, right? So this is requirement 1. Primary photo reference. I know it was 5 days ago, but the other thing we did was we looked for inspirations in style and in aesthetics, and maybe even in painting techniques. So requirement 2 is going to be the quote-unquote finished digital painting. Because we could always work on it more. And I'm just going to play with a few kind of techniques to finish it off that remind you of some of the benefits of digital. So this is what I have so far, right? You can see my reference images here. You can see some of my style inspirations here. I'm painting it at 16 inches wide by 14 inches tall so that my printable area is 11 by 14 by 350 pixels per inch, which will give us a lot of portfolio printing options for our final portfolio. All right. And how do I finish it up? Well, we are on this refined paint layer. And the refined paint layer obviously does a lot of work for us. So there's only 3 layers I require for you to have what I call a full understanding of the digital painting process. You're going to have a blank white layer on the bottom. Then I ask you to have a base paint layer where everything is filled in, right? And you can see if there are gaps that aren't filled in, they kind of come through. And then and that's just done with the standard 100% opacity, pressure sensitive brush. And then the last thing is the refined paint layer. And the refined paint layer you do with a lower opacity brush. I like to use around 60%, and we customize this brush. So that, we'll look at it up close here, it gives you a more interesting kind of paint texture as it builds. And it will automatically kind of help to blend just through the different edges. So how do we finish this off? I'm going to turn on the gray background just because that helps to see the highlights and the shadows. And I'm also going to turn on the navigator tool, which helps me see it large and also helps me kind of zoom in and move around it without having to change tools. And I'm just going to stay right on the brush tool. And then just to remind yourself of this process, which we did a lot last class, you hold down Option to steal a color. And it can be from your stylistic reference. It can be from your photo reference. You can steal from the things you put down, but remember, it's going to put them down only at the opacity of your brush. And so the refined paint is blending as you paint because it's only painting it at around 60%. So if you feel like your refined paint is too harsh or not getting you where you want to go, it might be because you're at too high a percentage in your refined paint. You want to layer it. So for like the shadows of the shirt, or the shadows in the mouth, even though I'm painting a really dark color, I'm layering it in so it blends with all the other colors. There's a lot of painting and kind of repainting to get that effect. Let's see. And I like to turn off my base paint every once in a while and see what I've done with just the refined paint layer. Because that will show me where I haven't been spending enough attention kind of blending. This is where you're really controlling your paint surface. And it's all up to you how you want to use these techniques, but I find having these kind of stylistic references off to the side. I have Jim Dine and William de Kooning. They really help me to be a little bit more confident, a little bit bolder, especially with kind of purer color choices, just like I would if I was painting in acrylic or with oil or with watercolor, or even with colored pencils or crayon, which is kind of the effect my brush is giving right now. But it's going all over the top of that shape painting, which kind of fills in the gaps. The base painting. Now my guy looks a little manic, but that can be for lots of reasons with human expression. Like I can always tweak the eyes and stuff at the end. Right now I'm just trying to make something exist and get pixels down and get back into the flow of it. So you will probably have to find your customized brush again. You'll find them at the end. So if I switch to this brush, remember that when you switch brushes, you'll have to reset your brush settings. And you can find your brush settings under Window if you don't see it in the side. And the ones that are most helpful are shape dynamics. You want to play with the size jitter. You want to make the control pressure sensitive. That's very important. You want to play with the angle jitter so it's not always locked into one angle. And you want to play with the roundness just a little bit. That strengthens the core of your brush. And then it's really helpful to play with texture, to me, for my effect, and then to use the water texture and take that depth way down so that it helps to blend it, as you use it. It's like the paper texture or the canvas texture coming through a little bit. And it just opens up the brush so that these other things can come through. And then you just find the size you want. With your custom brushes, you cannot change the hardness or softness of the edge of the brush because the custom brushes have that already built in. But because there's soft edges in my custom brush and hard edges, it kind of naturally starts to blend at its edges. So I'm doing all of my blending just through overlapping. Now what does that look like when I have the finished kind of paint film? Zooming in here at 100%, what you would see on a print. It starts to look like this. Right? And that pressure sensitive brush lets me do kind of, even though my brush is pretty huge right now, these kind of lighter marks at a lower opacity. Hold down Option to steal the color. Put that in. Now what if I wanted a smoother surface? You know, I'm going for the William de Kooning kind of really painterly, expressive surface, and I'm achieving that. But if I wanted it to be more kind of airbrushed and smooth, once you have pixels down, you can go to the Smudge tool. And the Smudge tool is underneath the Paint Bucket tool, in the drawer, underneath Blur and Sharpen. And the Smudge tool, you can use different brushes for it. I'm just using a standard like hard round brush for it. And then what you can do is push the pixels around. Just like if you were smudging them with your finger, like the paint is still wet. So if I wanted the eyes to be a lot smoother, I could kind of finger paint and smudge those pixels into each other. Sometimes it smudges a group of pixels you don't want a little too much, so then you gotta kind of wipe it away with other pixels. So the directionality really matters. And that will give you a very different feel, right? Like someone just took their finger and smudged through the paint. And it's a way you can give some variety to your paint texture if you want that. And I might want it in some places. I think it's somewhat helpful in the eyes, because I don't think Muppet eyes are fuzzy like the rest of them. It's also just kind of a fun way to play with the shapes. But do know that when you kind of zoom in, it will give you a different feel to those pixels when they're smudged. And I definitely recommend making it pressure sensitive for size, the Smudge brush. Each tool you can choose a different brush for, but when I go back to my painting tool, it should remember the last one I used. So I shouldn't have to reset the brush or the brush settings. And remember that your brush is just already saved in the list. If you want to try others, you can. Just remember how powerful brush settings can be. Oh my gosh. There we go. Yeah, so I just recommend not using smudge too much, right? It can start to look really artificial. But if you have enough refined paint kind of built up, it really looks pretty natural, right? Like these kind of smears of different paints. But it takes all that hard work of building up your own pixels first. That's one of the great advantages of traditional oil paint over watercolor or acrylic or tempera, is that it stays wet long enough for you to do this kind of smudging and kind of blending of the edges. So with digital, you have that flexibility as well. Just cleaning up those edges with smudging. Pushing those pixels around. All right. Now, it's a good idea, even when you're near the end, only have the one layer unlocked that you're painting on. And try not to be zoomed in too much. Definitely not more than 100%. And then be zoomed out as much as you can in order to kind of get more covered. Remember, you have the navigator tool, you can see the whole of it.